I want to talk to you this morning on a topic that really is an experience for me, and I know probably has been an experience for you in times past. And I was listening to Evan talk about doing things with his son and experiences he's going through, and we all go through experiences. Some are good, some are bad, but I want to talk about some experiences around the wilderness. And wilderness makes you better. About a month ago, my pastor, Steve Kelly, asked me to go on a father and son. It's a UTV four-wheeling out in the desert, in the Grand Canyon, and to spend 4 days out there and just have a great time. He says it'll change your life. Now, for probably about the last 5 or 6 years, I've turned him down on it for one reason or another, and maybe one was because it cost so much money. But at this time, when he said it's going to change your life, and it was an opportunity for father and son, I thought I probably better put everything aside and do this. I really felt like the Spirit, just yelled in my ear, do it. So I did. So I agreed and I got signed up. I didn't know what to expect. But here's some of the things that I did know. There would be 9 dads and their sons. We would be sleeping in a tent that we would have to put up. The overnight temps, especially on the first night, was going to be a cold night, below freezing at 28 degrees. Probably the reason why the sleeping bag was $200 by itself. We could bring 1 change of clothes. We need to conserve space and room in the UTV to be able to put everything in there that we were carrying, because we carried cans and cans of gasoline and everything, because we were going out into the middle of the desert. We would not shower for 4 days. I knew this. That might be okay for Eldon, not okay for me. The other thing that I knew is that they would feed us breakfast, lunch, and dinner from the tailgate of a truck. Now, how good is this going to be? Well, I can tell you it was amazing. We'd be given a 2-inch roll of toilet paper and the use of a community shovel to go into the woods and poop. Eldon says, I am not going to poop the whole time I'm there. And I was not interested in the community shovel and what was on it, so I used my boot to dig my own hole. But the best part is we had our own UTV, our own side-by-side. It was a 4-passenger, all our luggage and stuff and gear was in the back seats, and this UTV, this Can-Am 1000 would do over 90 miles per hour. So I'm in, right, Nate? I'm in. I'm like, okay, I can handle all the other stuff. We got picked up in Vegas by a 15-passenger van for the 2.5-hour trip over to where the adventure would start on the edge of the desert. And we were about an hour and a half into the trip, and we're going up through the mountains, rocks on each side. And I got to tell you, this got really real when Titus, this 6'3" guy, it's like John the Baptist. That's all I can think of. John the Baptist. He was born in the woods, and his hair was about 3 feet long, and he was just the coolest dude. And later on, I found out he was the son of a pastor that's pastoring in Japan. He was raised in Japan. He speaks Japanese. He speaks English, and talked about becoming a righteous man. I'm telling you, the words that came from that man's mouth, I would have never dreamed would change my life the way that it did. But he stops the van on a highway, and there's just a little turn off there and the guardrail, and he says, all right, everybody get out and pee. And so, there's like 15 people standing out there. Well, not me. I'm like, I'll wait. This just was like getting too real for me. And I'm like, man, O'Day, this is good. I mean, we just passed a gas station. Why didn't we stop? But they were getting us ready for the trip, and everybody's just kind of looking around. They're like, right here? Right here, Titus? He said, yeah, right here. and so it was just, this was the start of my trip. And you know, then the really tough part, though, was giving up your phones for 4 days. Giving up your phone for 4 days. I'm telling you, I was shaking on the first day. But about the second day, I was completely detoxed. And I wasn't concerned about any of you. I wasn't concerned about business, my finances, or anything. I mean, I was in a UTV that would just rock across the desert. I was having the time of my life. And one of the things that I actually learned from this, from the email that went out to different people and you know, people that I have to communicate with, they were so cheering me on. They were like, great. Turn it off. We'll talk to you in 4 days. But after 4 days, I didn't want to talk to them. It took me 4 hours after that 4 days. I carried my phone around in my pocket. I'm like, I don't want to turn it on. Because I kept hearing everybody else's phone. They were turning it on. Ding, 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 ding. All them guys and all them important. One guy, he couldn't even do, I can't do anything on my phone because one message right after another was coming. And he counted them up. He had 78 messages. I put mine on silent, put it into my pocket. By the time I finally turned it on, that thing buzzed on my leg for about 20 minutes. And I was like, wow, I can't wait to do this next week. I was ready to go back. I had no idea, though, how valuable this time would be for me and my son Eldon, us together, and what it would just teach me about my life, teach me about what I do, teach me about my family, my marriage, my work, everything that I do. There was so many lessons that I could never go over them all, but I am going to talk to you about a few of them. But just to give you a little background, the Grand Canyon National Park, a lot of you know what that is, but it's much more than just the Grand Canyon. The park size is 1,218,375 acres. 1,904 square miles. I didn't say 1,904 miles. I said 1,904 square miles. The canyon length that the Colorado River runs through is 278 miles long, 18 miles wide at its widest point. It's 1 mile deep. It is one of the 7 natural wonders of the world. And this is where our adventure was going to take us. I want to help you visualize our journey. So I've got a good many pictures I'd like to put up here. And guys, you just can roll through them. You can see us there having breakfast, putting our phones away. Oh, breakfast was amazing. There's the truck that followed us around, and there's Eldon and I coming off a little tiny jump there. Steve Kelly, look at his face. I'd put that on there just to embarrass him. I got to send it to him. And there we were on the second day as we got to the Grand Canyon, and it was just such an incredible sight as we stood there. There's all of our guys and sons together, and every night we had these campfires, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. There's Titus. I told you he was born in the woods. That is John the Baptist today. Changing a tire. It was pretty easy. Didn't have to have a jack. We did it together, and Beckett and Nathan got to go with us. Invited them along another one of the nights. We're 7,500 feet setting right there over the valley, looking down, and our tent was right there on the very edge, like I think 10 feet from the edge. It was just beautiful. We thought we was going to wake up to the sunrise, but it was a little bit off to our right. And that's it. So it kind of gives you a little bit of atmosphere as to what we were having this great adventure in. And how many dads think that maybe next year we would do a condensed version of something like this, maybe go hiking, go tenting, take our sons with us? And because I've learned so much about how they do this and how intentional they are in helping you to take a good look at your life. And in Ecclesiastes chapter 3 and verse 1, it says, to everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under the sun. One thing I realize out of this scripture is sometimes we don't take time for the purpose that God sends our way. And it's not so much about the ones that we do take time for, but God has a perfect plan. And he needs us to line up with all of it so that he can help us understand how much abundance is in this life that we live. But we all know just from a cell phone can take away a lot of the abundance that God wants for our marriages, for our relationships with our kids, and for people that are important in our life. So here's a few lessons of the wilderness and how it makes us better, and certainly how it made me better. But the first lesson that I learned from Jimmy was our leader, and Jimmy rocked. The minute we took out and he took off, he's going down the road and he sees that I'm right behind him eating his dust, because that's what you do. If you're with right behind somebody, you're just in a dust cloud the whole time. So I'd go left and I'd go right so that I could see, because I wanted to stay with him and not lose him. And he saw that there was nobody behind us for quite some ways. And so he was going up over these dunes and we were jumping and tearing sideways and everything. And I was following him everywhere he went. But I'm going to tell you what, when Jimmy wants to get away from you, you cannot catch Jimmy. And I was wondering from the start, how fun would this be? I've gone on snowmobile adventures where I've rented a snowmobile and the top speed was 25 miles per hour. I do that just leaving my yard. I mean, that is just no fun at all. But Jimmy would hit 90 miles an hour on every straightaway. And I'm like, Jimmy, you're something else. He was just so fun to ride with. But something that I learned from him was lesson number one. We were never blamed. We were always instructed. We were never blamed. That's some good parenting right there. We were never blamed. We were always instructed. I would dare say, and this has been true of myself, that we would probably spend more time on the blaming than the instruction that would actually change them and help them to not go back to what we're blaming them for whatever they did wrong. But on the first day, they taught us about this flagging system. So me being number 2, and there was 11 of us because there was a leader in the front and a leader in the back. And they said, when you come to a corner, the leader, Jimmy out in the front, he will stop and he will position you so that the person doesn't either go straight or left or right, when we're going the opposite direction. You stop, you get out, the kids can jump up on top of the hood, you can jump up and down and wave your hands and point which way to go. And he says, and do not, he got kind of stern here, do not leave your post until the leader in the back lets you go. They will always be in the back. When they get to you, you might be there 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes for everybody to catch up and make the turn. Do not leave your post, or somebody could get lost for a very long time. He said, now we have these satellite radios and you got a tracker on every one of your UTVs. We will find you. But if you think you're lost and you're not catching up to anybody, stay still. Don't keep becoming a moving target. Stay still. We'll come get you. So on the first day, and I've flagged a couple of times, so many turns. And then one of the last turns of the night, was Eldon and I. We stopped, but it was after this long run that everybody was just going really, really fast. It was getting close to being dark. We were just having so much fun. We did not know that there was a local, and it was a lady and her husband that was in this four-wheeler. She was doing along about 60, but I think the rest of us probably went by her doing at least 80. She did not appreciate that. We got to our turn, and so I'm the one that's trying to stop everybody and get them to turn, but I got to get ahead of them because I know I'm next to be the flag person, and everybody's kind of going by me because they can't get stopped. They're going so fast. I mean, we stopped real quick, and we're stopping everybody, and they're piling up just past us, and this lady is screaming at us, and she's pointing her finger at me, and she's like, you going too fast, slow down. And she just kept saying it, and you going too fast. Eldon yells out, you're going too slow. There's a reason why we passed you. But it was pandemonium. It was crazy. And the UTVs were just piling up and everything. And so I get them all stopped, and I'm telling them to turn around and to go the other direction. Now, I know how many's in the group, but I just lost track in all that confusion. Jimmy's already gone. And so I get everybody going that direction. And I'm like, okay, I think there's maybe one or two more. Well, after about 5 minutes, this guy comes. Now, one thing that we know is that the leader has a tire on top, okay? And he's the only, he just looks different than anybody else. And, with the helmets on and the gear over your face, you don't see somebody's face. You don't know who they are. So you got to landmark them by the vehicle. So Jimmy says, just make sure, they got the tire on top. Well, here comes the four-wheeler with the tire on top. And I'm like, oh, that's good. That's them. And so, they're supposed to give you thumbs up and everything. So I'm like, thumbs up. He stops. He pulls right beside me. I'm like, we good? And he says, no, wait for one more. I'm like, well, that's very specific. And then he takes off. But Jimmy said the leader would never pass us. He would always stay in the back. So I was confused, and Eldon said to me, no, that's what he said. He said, wait for one more, and that was the one with the tire on top. And I'm like, we waited, one more came. And so we're like, okay. And we waited, nobody else was coming, so we took off. But there was two more to come. What had happened was somebody had a flat tire, and in that flat tire hitting a big rock, there was something that happened to the axle, so they didn't want that dad and that son to be driving the one that was, still going, but just wasn't perfect, so they switched with them. And so now what I think is the leader has the tire on top is not the leader anymore, and he yells to me instruction, wait for one more. So I'm like, he's got to be the leader, And so he goes by, and so after one more comes through and I wait about 5 more minutes, I just decide to leave. And so we just go about maybe 1 mile and we're up to camp. And so we're putting up our tents, we're getting the fire going, it's now dark. And Jimmy says, he keeps counting all, and he looks at the cook and he says, I got to go out. There's 2 guys that didn't make it. And so he looks at them on his tracker, and these guys are way out in the woods. It took 3 hours for them to get back to camp. The temperatures had dropped from 75 degrees to 38 degrees by the time they got back. The bad part of it was they had switched vehicles, and so all their gear and coats and warmer stuff, they were in t-shirts and shorts, and it was 38 degrees, and so they were freezing when they finally showed up. And I'm like, okay, there was two more stops before we got there. I'm like, was that my fault? Oh, I hope that wasn't my fault. No, it was my fault. It was my fault. And so while I'm thinking that it possibly could be my fault, I'm like, I am not going to let them guys come and show up and have to put up their own tent. So I got Nate and I, we went and we put up his tent, got his tent already, nice camp spot and everything. They showed up. That 13-year-old boy was freezing to death, and the dad, he was like 6'6", and I thought he was going to kill me. He would just go like that, boom, he'd knock me 2 feet into the ground, and I'm like, oh, this is not starting off very good and everything, and he just stands by the fire, both of them, and they're getting warmed up, and he just looks around at everybody. He says, oh, guys, I'm just so glad I made it back to the camp. What an experience, he says. And I'm like, okay, he's not going to hurt me. We're going to be okay. But I don't want him to find out it's me. Well, 2 minutes later, he finds out it's me. And of course, it was the perfect storm. And isn't that where storms happen, is in the wilderness? And, one of the things that happens when you get into the wilderness, and I want to talk about this in a few minutes, the first thing you think of is, I'm in trouble. I did something wrong, and now this is why I'm in the wilderness. I can tell you right now, you are never in the wilderness for something that you've done wrong. Oh, we might create things. Some things are of our own making, but this is not the reason for the wilderness. Sometimes the best things that you do is make mistakes. So now that I see that this guy is okay, I'm wondering how Jimmy's going to handle it. And Jimmy just stands up and talks to us all, and he says, all right, let's talk about this flagging system. And he learned that, okay, there was a swapping, and like, oh man, I didn't even tell the leaders in the back that we were going to stop at an earlier camp than the camp at the schoolhouse. So they just kept, the leaders were following the dad and the son and just taking them all the way till the schoolhouse. And that was 30 miles away. So this whole adventure over 4 days, we did like 400 miles on the UTVs and didn't see hardly anything compared to all that you could see out there. But Jimmy just said, if this is the only thing that happens this whole trip, what a minor incident. And I'm telling you, you guys, I can tell from the first day with you, you guys are the best guys, the best trip, the best father and son trip we have ever had up to this point. And he continued to say that every day. And I talked to him later and I was like, you're so encouraging. He said, oh no, Kevin, let me tell you a couple of stories that happened. I mean, like we almost had one dad beat up another dad and one son beat up another son, and we're having to keep them apart and everything. You guys are saints. And we are having so much fun. This is the best father and son trip we have ever had. And so it was really real, but he was just so encouraging. And he told me, he said, Kevin, you're never going to get blamed for anything out here in the wilderness. And I thought, isn't that just like Jesus? We get out in the wilderness, and I want to tell you, that is such a scriptural truth. He's never blaming us for anything. And the reason why he never blames us is because he took all the blame that was on us, put it on himself, and took it to the cross and pointed at the devil as he took the keys of death, hell, and the grave from him and said, you can never blame them again. Now he tries and he comes like a roaring lion, but he is not a roaring lion. Do not let his blame end up biting you. God is not blaming you for anything in the wilderness. He is going to instruct you. He's going to make you. He's going to move you forward. So Jimmy gave just great instruction the whole time. Just really amazing. Lesson number 2, unwind and connect. We had fireside chats, and the last night chat was about the rose, the thorn, the giggle, and something that you are thankful for. And I listened to my son just really speak from his heart. I listened to Beckett speak from his heart. I listened to dads talk about their sons and sons talk about their dads. I've got to tell you, it moved me to tears. There was so much intimacy and so much inspiration that was so rich. And It was so tangible. You just sat there and every story was different. And the kids talked different because the kids' range was all the way from 4 to 13 years old. And my favorite was a little 4-year-old next to my son. Of course, I have to say that. But that little 4-year-old, every dad wanted to hug that kid. He just had a blast the whole time, sat so low in the seat, he had no idea what happened the whole 4 days. All he saw was the floorboard. And he would sleep, and then he'd wake up and he'd play and jump up and down, and Eldon and Beckett was playing with him and the other younger kids, and they just had such a blast. But these leaders were so good at making sure that we took a good look at what was important in life. And I'm sure many life-changing decisions, as was for me, were made around those campfire talks. Lastly, last one, number 3, the wilderness makes Kevin better. I am certainly thankful for my wilderness experience and what it taught me. Time is quickly passing. Do you know the busier you are and the more you think you're getting done, and the more vibrant maybe that your life is, the more accomplishment, the more success, you might think, oh, I need this because time is flying by. Time flies by 10 times faster when you are chasing the success that I know sometimes we call the American dream. But I can tell you it's one of the biggest distractions from the things that we should be giving attention to. And that made me better, understanding that time is quickly passing. Because Eldon, he isn't my career. Eldon, he isn't my goal. Eldon isn't an important project. He's my son. And this is defined mostly by the time I spend with him. Not even what we do. Not even where we go. Just the time that I spend with him. And God gave me everything that I needed on that trip. Not what I wanted, but he gave me what I needed. And I can tell you my wants have changed since I've been on that trip. I'm going to go through these real fast because I want to make this applicable to you. Benefits of the wilderness. Jesus never leaves us in the wilderness. You might be in a wilderness today and you're struggling to get through it and you're wondering, where is God? Come on, I've said it. Have you felt that way at times? Where is just me? But I'm going to preach to myself here for a little bit. Job 23 and verse 8 through 10. Job says, I go to the east, but he's not there. I go to the west, but I cannot find him. I do not see him in the north, for he is hidden. I look to the south, but he is concealed. Look at this. But he knows where I am going. I can't see him. I don't know where he is. I don't know what he's doing. I look northeast, south, and west, but I am still assured of this. Though I cannot see him, I know he sees me, and he knows where I am going. In Job's wilderness, he knows that God is always there. Folks, know that God is always there. Listen closely to this. The wilderness is not God's punishment or God's disapproval of your life. The wilderness is not God's abandonment. He's always there, folks. Hebrews chapter 13 and verse 5. For God has said, I will never fail you. I will never abandon you. I like this one. Number 2, wilderness suffering qualifies us. And none of us want to suffer. But we do all want to be qualified. We want to be qualified for the things that we see for the plan of life and all the things that we want to accomplish and achieve, and even the things that the God dreams in our lives, we want to achieve them. But we go through suffering at times. And in Hebrews 5 and 8 and 9, it says, even though Jesus was God's son, he learned obedience from the things he suffered. In this way, God qualified him as a perfect high priest And he became the source of eternal salvation for those who obey him. He was being matured in the wilderness, he himself. And we know that his purpose was to bring eternal salvation to people. And he himself had to look to his own Father. He, the Son, God, I need your strength to fulfill my purpose. And he went through suffering to be able to become our high priest. Number 3, the wilderness humbles us and brings us into his presence. Deuteronomy 8 and verse 2 says, and you shall remember that the Lord your God led you all the way these 40 years in the wilderness to humble you. Do you know humility? Humility brings us into obedience. The Bible says obedience is better than sacrifice. And that through that obedience is how he brings about his plan in our lives. How many want God's plan? It comes through obedience. It comes through humbling ourselves. God wants us to be close to him. That obedience leads us into a close relationship with him. Isaiah 57 and verse 15. For thus says the high and lofty one who inhabits eternity, whose name is holy. Listen to this. I dwell in the high and holy place with him who has a contrite and a humble spirit, to receive the spirit of the humble and to revive the heart of the contrite ones. Humility. Humbling yourself, even when you know you're right and you've got to be up at the top. It's got to end with your answer. I'm telling you, that gets us away from God, not closer to him. You may be right, but I can tell you, quietness, pulling back, let things happen around you. You don't always have to have the answer. And know that sometimes when you withhold your answer, that's humility. And that says you're going up into the high place of the Spirit, the holy place of the Spirit. You begin to have a relationship with God, not here on earth, but up in heaven. You want to get to the high place, it takes humility to get there, because humility brings us into the presence of God. The enemy wants us to get angry in our wilderness. He wants us to get bitter. He wants us to get critical. But you know what? Jesus is going to use the wilderness. He's going to bring you up to a high and holy place, because that's what he does in the wilderness. Just humble yourself. You probably won't find a way out of your wilderness, but Jesus will, because that's what he does best. He's always making a way. Let's everybody stand. Today, maybe you're going through a wilderness. I'm not going to ask for a raise of hands. I think everybody knows what a wilderness experience is. We could all raise our hands and say, yeah, I've been through it. I know I'll probably go through it again. But I can tell you, even though you're going to go through it again, and you will, there's purpose in your wilderness. God is preparing you. God will qualify you. God will bring you close to him. Let me tell you, the wilderness has purpose in it. Don't be afraid of it. Don't fear it. When you're going into it, like Job, say, I can't see you here, there, or anywhere else, but I know you see me, and I know you've already prepared the way. I know you're qualifying me. I know you're going to deliver me. I know this victory on the other side. You won't keep me in this dry desert place, but you allow me to drink from springs of living water. This is what my family's going to experience. This is what my marriage is going to experience. I'm going to make sure my children get to see the goodness of God for the quality time that I spend with them, just like my Heavenly Father spends with me. Don't fear the desert. God's got purpose in it.